You're listening to The Physician's Mind, raw stories and real talks from people striving for greatness in medicine and in life. This is where ambition meets action and where the relentless come to level up. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get right into it. Today on The Physician's Mind, I'm joined by Dr. Bryan Jepson, physician, author, and advocate for financial independence in medicine. Dr. Jepson is the author of The Physician's Path to True Wealth, a powerful and practical guide that's helping doctors everywhere take control of their financial futures without losing sight of their purpose. His mission is to equip healthcare professionals with the tools they need to escape burnout, thrive financially, and live with intention. We talk about his own path to medicine, the lessons he learned through hardship, and how any physician or student can build a life of freedom by taking ownership of their time, their money, and their mindset. Before we dive in, a few quick things. There's a free resource. If you haven't already, head to www.thephysiciansmind.com and grab the free guide, 10 Rules for Mental Toughness and Peak Performance. It's a short but powerful read packed with the core principles I've learned from elite doctors, athletes, and military personnel. Second, please support the mission. I'm training for Ironman 70.3 on September 14th, 2025, and trying to raise $10,000 for Catch a Lift Fund. It's an incredible nonprofit that helps combat wounded veterans heal through fitness. If this podcast brings you value, please consider donating or sharing the link to support. It's a cause bigger than all of us. Without further ado, please enjoy my episode with Dr. Bryan Jepson. Share on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. All right, folks, welcome back to the Physician's Mind podcast. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson, and today I'm honored to be speaking with Dr. Bryan Jepson. Dr. Jepson, how are you today, sir? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Jepson, you have spent more or less 30 years in emergency medicine. What have you learned in that time that most doctors don't yet realize about the long game in such a career?
Well, that's a good question. Time flies for one. It's hard to believe that it's been 30 years. And, I think that a lot of trying to stay in medicine and make it relevant and make it happy or make you happy while doing it, I think a lot of it is about finding your purpose, and your purpose. There's a great book that I just recently read that I'd recommend to any of your listeners, and it's from Jordan Grummett. It's called The Purpose Code. And he is a physician who, after I don't know exactly how long he was in, but probably 15 or 20 years, realized that being a physician maybe wasn't his ultimate purpose in life, and he found a lot more purpose from podcasting and writing. And even though he thought that going into medicine was the right choice for him initially, he realized over time that that wasn't what really drove his, joy in life. And so he actually is a hospice physician now. So he continues to work in the field, but changed from being an internist and just does hospice medicine, but primarily writes and podcasts, and that's where he gets his joy. And anyway, I think it's a really good book because it helps you to define what you want out of life. And for many of us going into medicine, I think we all think that medicine is our purpose, right? That's kind of what drove us into it. And many of us, that stays the case throughout our career. And medicine is really what we derive the best satisfaction out of. And we like helping other people, and we like our job, and we like doing all that stuff. And that's wonderful. But, I think that as you go through your career, in life in general, sometimes that the smaller purposes in life that really bring you satisfaction and joy can change. And I think you need to be flexible with that and realize that, it's okay if medicine is just a job for a while or for part of your career. It doesn't have to be your big purpose in life. But you need to find something that brings you joy, whether it's within medicine or outside of medicine. I don't know if you've seen, Medscape does a survey almost every year about physician burnout. And the most recent one in 2024 said that currently about 49% of physicians feel like they're burned out. And that's super high. That's like half. So you almost have to go into it assuming that at some point during your career, you'll probably experience that. and to prepare for it. And, I think there's lots of ways to do that. And one is branching out your skills and, creating multiple streams of income and being financially prepared so that if you do start feeling that way and medicine is not feeling like your purpose anymore or your full purpose that brings you joy, that you can have the options to look in different directions. And so I think that when you're starting your career, it's hard to anticipate stuff like that. You don't think it's going to happen. But, if you talk to most doctors my age, most of them will say at some point, yeah, it happened for me.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to diving into your journey, considering that you've transitioned largely to a financial career now. We are definitely going to be diving more into that, sir. But
Yeah.
at what point in your medical career did you realize that financial literacy was just important as clinical competency? Because that was
You,
sort of where you got the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think for me it was a couple years out of residency. I think that's when you start feeling more confident in your clinical skills. You've been through your training, you've actually worked in the field for a while. You start just gaining some self-confidence and you feel like you kind of know what you're doing. And at that point, that's when I started looking at other stuff and branching out and getting interested in finance. I wish I would have been interested in it sooner, just because I think it's important to know from the very beginning. I think that saves mistakes, but I did it early enough that it helped me throughout the remainder of my career. I was on a good path and the right path. And, I think a lot of people make the mistake of waiting until they're getting burned out and ready to retire and then saying, okay, I've got to shore up my finances. And man, at that point, it's a lot harder.
Most definitely. The sooner the better.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I have a book here that you've written, The Physician's Path to True Wealth.
There
So
it
what
is.
inspired
Yeah.
you to write this book, and how do you define true wealth?
I wrote the book because, I'm a transition to a financial advisor career for the most part, even though I still do shifts in the ER. I haven't completely retired from medicine yet, but I realized that the way I can make the biggest impact is to educate more broadly. I can help my personal finance clients, but there's only so many of those people that I can see, but I think that personal finance is super important for physicians. The thing that hurts the most to me is seeing doctors who feel stuck because at the end of their career or nearing the end of their career because of poor choices that they made, or they just didn't know what to do, or they didn't seek help when they should have, and now they have to keep working and to maintain the lifestyle that they've created. And so I really feel like that we're not good in medicine at teaching finance to young physicians. And I think that if we were better at that and we emphasized it better, a lot more doctors would be smarter with their money. And so that was my motivation to write the book. The book is, I don't get deep into the financial weeds for the most part. It's 12 basic steps that, if everybody knew those steps, that's going to get you 80 or 90% of the way there. And then, any of the stuff on top of that is just gravy, and that's where I can really help people with their financial planning. But, if everybody just understood that basic stuff, man, it'd be a game changer, I think, for physicians.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic read. I mean, it begins with defining what wealth means for yourself, and then it moves on to not spending more than you save, and particularly investing wisely and avoiding bad debt and things like basics of taxes, and then all the way down to retirement planning and caring for your family. It's a fantastic read. Any of my listeners in the audience who are involved in the medical field that want to learn more about generating wealth in your life, this is a book that I would recommend, The Physician's Path to True Wealth. Now, Dr. Jepson, you earned a master's degree in finance and became a CFP after a significant period of time working in medicine. How did that process expand your understanding of what physicians really need to know about money?
Well, I think that the thing that it taught me, and the reason why I did it, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on the basics of personal finance. Because I've been just reading and studying about it just on my own for a couple of decades now and investing on my own and following all of that. And so I felt like I was in a pretty good place in my understanding. But when I decided that I wanted to explore it in more detail, I wanted to go get a master's degree because I really wanted to understand the nuances and to understand the industry. And what I guess what I learned both from that and from the process of becoming a CFP is that I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and that it's actually a really broad field, and there's a lot in there, a lot of nuances and a lot of stuff that is changing all the time. And I mean, basics are applicable to everybody, but everybody's situation is also different. And so, there's a mantra that says personal finance is personal, and that's actually true, because everybody has stuff in their life, that's different than everybody else. And how to apply these basic principles to your situation is what a CFP does. And to kind of be sure that you're not making mistakes and not missing stuff. And, because even, especially as you create more income, even fairly minor mistakes or just things that you might overlook can make a big difference in your total net worth. So, that's if anything, I just enjoy the learning process. And it was cool to go back to school when I'm an old fart, and being my cohort was all my kids' ages, and teach them a thing or two, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be an interesting experience. Physicians, despite having such a large degree of education and a high income compared to the rest of society, why do you think so many of them still struggle with money?
I think it's because they don't focus on it. I think most physicians, they go into medicine with the understanding that they'll probably be financially secure in that job. I mean, it pays well, but I don't think that's why people go into medicine. I don't think people go into medicine to make money. I think for most of us, it's because of the intellectual challenge and to be help other people, and that they feel a purpose in that. So I think a lot of people just take it for granted that finances will fall into place, and without making some good choices, that's not necessarily the case. And so yeah, I think that's why it's certainly not that doctors aren't smart enough to handle their finances. It's just that, we're distracted by other stuff. We have big income, big paychecks, and that makes us feel comfortable, probably more so than we should. So, or, you just don't understand how the choices that you make, especially when you're young and starting out, can grow by the time you're my age, and so I think that, and then lots of times you're trying to catch up. And when you're trying to catch up, you've already probably created a lifestyle that makes it harder to save. And so, yeah, I think I would say that's it.
So definitely better to get an early start, be intentional, and create a plan and try your best to explore resources to develop a degree of financial literacy.
I realized that a couple of questions back, I forgot to define what true wealth was. So yeah, so this, since it's in the title of my book, is probably a good idea to explain what that means. To me, it's not about money. It's not about what you have, how much, what you buy, what vacations you go on, what fancy cars you drive. It's nothing about that. I think true wealth to me is that money is a tool that allows you to create control over your time and to create a life that's fulfilling. So if you have the ability to not be worried about finances and can actually do what you want with your time, that may be continuing to work. So it's not about necessarily retiring early, because if you get great satisfaction out of working, you should keep working. But it's you do it because you get to choose to do it and not because you have to do it. And that makes a big difference in how you approach your job and your life and all that kind of stuff. And so to me, you're truly wealthy if you have control over your time, if your assets are working for you. So in other words, you've created enough of those assets that's generating passive income for you, and so that you don't have to go to work to just maintain your lifestyle. And then I also think it's about being able and willing to explore your hobbies and able and willing to give back to others. And I think that creating those relationships and creating that fulfillment in life is what wealth is in my mind. We all have to eat, and we all have to pay for our bills and stuff like that. And so money is a tool to get there. So it's not that it's not important, but that should not be the focus of what your money should not be your goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than just a arbitrary numerical value, it should be a goal of generating control over your time, primarily through the acquisition of assets that provide income in a passive manner, more or less, thus enabling you to create a life that's fulfilling, exploring what is truly interesting to you, supporting your family, and having complete freedom. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful definition of wealth.
yeah, and that's going to be different for everybody. That's why a number is not important. Everybody's number is going to be different because their goal in life is different and what fulfills them is different. Some people it's traveling the world. Some people they have no interest in that. They'd rather volunteer at their community church. I mean, so a lot of I mean, I think how you said it is good. It's just, it's finding what's right for you. And that takes some introspection, right? You have to understand and kind of getting back to my original question is, what is your purpose? I mean, what drives satisfaction to you? But having your finances shored up allows you complete freedom to do that, which is an awesome feeling.
Like we discussed, the arbitrary number isn't the right goal to be striving for, but rather it's true wealth. So, what can a physician do to transition from being a high income earner to a long term wealth builder?
Well, I think the most important thing is planning. You have to be intentional about it because I think it's very easy for high income earners to fall into the lifestyle creep where, you just start buying all the stuff. And physicians, we've had to put up with delayed gratification for a long time, just to kind of get through our training. And so it's very easy once we're done and now we have a big paycheck to just say, okay, now it's time to, increase my lifestyle and start buying stuff. And it actually makes it harder when, especially if you're a young physician coming out and then you're making the same amount as your colleagues who have been at it for a longer time and they have a nice house and they have a nice car and they go to a country club and they're going off on vacations and you say to yourself, well, I make the same amount as they do. I should be able to do that kind of stuff too. And there's two issues with that. One is they may have already achieved a degree of true wealth because of good decisions that they made, or they may be making terrible decisions and just buying stuff and have very little assets. So you don't want to try and compare yourself to others, but you want to be sure that you're intentional about saving and investing and creating a plan and understanding what your goals are. And all those things are going to help you stay on the path and not let external forces kind of derail you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really being intentional, avoiding the lifestyle creep that can very easily come upon you once you're graduated. Don't compare yourself to others, but rather focus on your own personal progress and how far along you've come towards your goal. And that emphasizes the importance of having a clear goal, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
having the intentionality to deliberately plan clear goals for what you want your life to look like. I was actually just in a conversation with Dr. Jordan Frey, prudent plastic surgeon. He said the same thing. Having a clear vision for your life, where you want to be post training, it's critical for not only your general progression, but especially for your financial plans.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where a financial planner or a financial coach or however, a mentor or anybody like that can really help you because, they know how to help you create that and to verbalize it and then to get it written down. Because I mean, I think if you don't write it down and actually, kind of check it and be sure that you're staying in on that path, chances are you're going to wander. And, so I think more than trying to squeeze out better returns on investments or something like that, financial planning of whatever sort you choose to do is about avoiding mistakes, keeping you on the path, helping you define what your path is, which is a super valuable task. Most of us don't do it.
Exactly. And on the topic of mistakes, what are some of the most common ones that you see physicians making within more or less the first 10 years of their practice?
Honestly, I think the biggest one is lifestyle creep. Just spending too much early on. There's, some of the other financial advisors or, kind of voices in the physician finance space talk about living like a resident after you're done. And, I certainly, if you can do that, that's valuable. I don't think you have to necessarily even go that far, but I don't think you should live like a mid-career or late career attending right off the bat either. You just, so I think the biggest thing is be intentional about what you choose to spend your money on and be sure that it's something that you really value, and not just you're doing it just because you feel like that's what you deserve as a doctor. Be sure that you value it and learn to value spending and investing more than buying stuff, just stuff, because stuff ultimately doesn't bring satisfaction, at least not long lasting. But saving and investing will allow you to develop the kind of true wealth that I was talking about. So I think that's a big one. Some of the other ones is just not saving enough. Kind of putting things off and just saying, well, I'll save later when I have my loans paid off, or when I have when I bought my first house or whatever, then I'll start to save. But yeah, the earlier you save and the earlier you invest, the power of compounding interest is real. I mean, it's an exponential curve. And so the earlier you can get on it, the more that's going to grow, as you're approaching retirement. So those are big ones. The other one I think is not investing aggressively enough. When you're young, you should not be super concerned about the volatility of the stock market, right? Because you have lots of time for those ups and downs to play out. And in the long run, stocks have always done better than any other asset class. And if you're super conservative minded and say, okay, well, I want to have 50% in cash or 50% in bonds or stuff like that, you're just not going to get that same rate of return and exponential growth as you would if because even just a 1 or 2% change in your rate of return makes a huge difference on that growth curve, like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars different. And so, being willing to take some risks. And when I say risks, I mean not doing stupid stuff, but being able to tolerate the volatility of some of the higher return investments, that makes a big difference too. And so kind of understanding your risk capacity, which is basically how much time do you have before you need that money. And if it's a long time, being willing to take some more aggressive risks. Oh, just not having appropriate amount of insurance, like not having disability insurance, not having life insurance early on. Hopefully, as you grow and your assets grow, you can eliminate those insurances down the road when you can self-insure. But early on, man, if you become disabled and you can't keep getting those high paychecks and you're not covered for that, that's devastating financially. And then I guess a final one is just, focusing. And this is a fairly common one, because I don't know, there's part of the financial community that is very debt averse, right? So get out of debt as soon as you can. That's thought. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have a lot of student loans and your decision is to pay off all those loans before you start investing anything, I think that is going to hurt you down the road because, honestly, most of the student loans are relatively low interest, and you'll get them paid off, especially if you don't just keep adding more loans to it. But you should be investing at the same time, because like we've already talked about, the earlier you get in, the quicker that the compounding interest works for you. And down the road, your loans will be gone. But if you don't have enough assets starting to build on themselves, then you're pretty far behind.
Yeah, so definitely I think the key mistake is not investing early enough. And on top of that, failing to strategize effectively to
Yeah.
maximize your returns from interest or whatever it may be. Other than that, lifestyle creep, letting that seep in, avoiding living like a resident for a few years after training to really lock in your financial stability, things of that nature. Some of the biggest mistakes you've seen. Very interesting to hear. So, for medical students and residents that are thinking about financial planning, what are some of the things they should be thinking about, even if they're currently buried in loans, be it a first year med student or someone in residency?
Yeah. No, it's tough to engage a financial planner, when you don't have any money. And I get that, financial planning I mean, there's fees involved and but I think the most important stuff is to realize that you should start learning stuff, even when you're focused on studying medicine and creating your clinical acumen. Take time to start reading. Just start reading, listening to podcasts. Whether it's my book or there's lots of other resources out there. There you go. Read that book. That'll do it. So, if you start reading and learning on your own, get the foundation. Get the basics in play. Don't worry about, don't go far in the weeds. I mean, you can spend a ton of time, and there's lots of resources out there that will teach you everything you could ever want to know about finance, that you can learn all that stuff for free if you look hard enough on the internet. But it's also hard to know what to focus on. And you can spend a lot of time doing it. So I would say start with the basics. I mean, my book was intentionally designed to hit the basic stuff, be sure that everybody has the foundational information that they need. And then, beyond that, I guess I would say the other thing is that even though you're in medical school and even though you're in residency and you're living on loans or whatever, I mean, that's still your source of income. And so you can still learn to live below your means, right? And so even when your means are not very high, you still have to have the discipline to live below that and to try not to rack up loans that are unnecessary. I mean, some of it, very few people can pay for medical school out of pocket, but you don't also have to buy a house and, drive a nice car and stuff like that. You can still live below your means. And if you do that, if you learn to do that, hopefully that will become a habit for you so that once you're out of training, you've already knocked off the first couple of steps on that path.
Yeah, and that sounds oddly familiar, probably because I've just read about it in your book, along the lines of, if you don't have to take out the loans that are offered to you, don't take them out.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can live frugally, especially when you're living on that debt, that's probably a great idea, at the
absolutely.
very least. When physicians feel overwhelmed or they feel behind financially, how do you coach them through making the initial decisions to take the first step?
The first step is the first step. I mean, we start with budgeting and just say, okay, budgeting and goal setting, where it's like, are you living below your means? How much are you saving? What are your goals? What are your short-term goals, your midterm goals, your long-term goals? And they're all going to be different, managed differently actually and prepared for differently. So the first step of financial planning is understanding expenses, understanding income, understanding assets, and understanding goals. And then we modify it from there, and if they're behind, then we have to create a plan to get them caught up. And if they're doing okay, then we can explore some other options of stuff that they can do that would be outside of the usual stuff. And that's when finance gets fun, actually, when you have opportunity to explore alternative investments or start creating more passive income for yourself, or that's when financial planning is really, really fun. But everybody needs that comprehensive written plan first, and all of those things are encompassed in that. So
Yeah, yeah, very important to create an idealized plan. And I think from what I've read, from what I've gathered, I think that's exactly why it's useful to have a high quality coach in by way of a financial planner. Because like when I was reading through the chapter about taxes, like we were talking about before we started recording, there was so much information about different deductions, different tax credits, things that you can do to minimize your tax burden. And that's where a guy like yourself comes into play to guide you along. As the individual involved, it's important to have a basic understanding, but a professional can ease some of that burden with their specialized knowledge and support you to really optimize your financial life.
yeah, for sure. It's hard to keep track of all that stuff, and a lot of it changes, I mean, every Congress has the opportunity to change the law about finance, and it's changing all the time. And so it really is hard unless you're doing it full time, or that's kind of become your expertise to understand everything and to be able to apply it to your situation. And so I think that sometimes financial planning gets disparaged a little bit and said, "Oh, we're DIYers, we can do it ourselves, we're smart enough," or whatever. And I get that. I mean, I was like that too until I became a financial planner. And that was after I had gone and done the education and realized, hey, there's a lot here that most people just aren't going to know how to apply it. And I think that's where it separates you from basic stuff to where you can actually really, get some value out of the whole planning process. And, most people kind of think of financial planning as investment management, where they're telling you what investments to get, and that's only a small part of it. A lot of it's taxes, it's estate, it's reviewing insurances, it's being sure you're budgeting correctly, it's planning for retirement, planning for uh, your extended commitments, all that kind of stuff is part of it. So
Yeah, and I mean, when you're a physician or a busy professional, you don't have the time to be looking into the nuances of tax code. That's exactly
no,
what the professional's there for. And I think Robert Kiyosaki mentioned it's worth spending a good amount of money on a good financial planner, having that on your team. Would you
yeah,
agree?
he was really good about that. Just teaching how it's valuable to create a team, even if you could do things yourself. Because it may not be worth your time to do it. So in other words, if you're a physician and you're busy, and like you mentioned, the last thing you want to do when you have time off is go research the tax code. It's going to be worth paying somebody to do that for you. And so I think creating a good team around you is valuable. And yeah, it costs some money, but ultimately, hopefully, it will add value to your life.
Yeah, most definitely. And I believe it was Henry Ford. I just did a quick search here. Henry Ford, obviously founder of Ford Motor Company, attributed to saying, "Why would I do that when I can hire someone to do it for me?"
There you go. There
So
you go.
brilliant. You've touched on this a little bit earlier when we were discussing what true wealth means, obviously having control of your time and the ability to engage in what a fulfilling life would be to the individual. So, what role does autonomy play, be it financial or otherwise, in the physician's well being and long term fulfillment?
I mean, to me, it's huge because I think we're all highly educated, right? We have a leadership mentality, most of us. I mean, just the fact that we're physicians is that we're smart enough and motivated and driven enough that's to get to that point. And so, one of the things that I think is challenging is in your careers if you just stagnate. If all of a sudden you've kind of been driven to get to this point, and then after that point, after you achieve it, you basically just stagnate in your learning process. And to me, I mean, I think that having the autonomy to make choices and to continue learning and to have control over my day and my life is what brings me fulfillment. And I mean, I just can't. I guess if you have your financial ducks in a row, you get to say no to stuff. You get to choose the stuff that you want to do. And if there's stuff in your life or even in your career that you don't like, you have the autonomy and the ability to say no to those things and to fill it up with stuff that you like better. And if you are worried about losing your job, or that you need the income, or you just don't have that same confidence to actually say no to stuff. And so for me, I think that creating not only skills where your people want you because they understand that you're bringing something to the table beyond just the average person or doctor even, but being able to walk away if you don't like it I mean, that's power right there.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. And again, it just further emphasizes why financial freedom is something that's so valuable, so
Yeah,
worth striving for, because then you can just
absolutely.
really live life to the fullest.
Right.
Now, you mentioned in the book that you are the father of two children with disabilities. How has your personal experiences as a father of two children with autism shaped your priorities, both in the financial and in the professional world?
Puts everything in perspective very quickly. Yeah, I have two sons with autism. They're adults now, but they're fully dependent on me, not only for my life but for their life. And so, it changes how, from a financial perspective, it changes how much I need to prepare. Lots of people have the luxury to say, okay, well, I'm going to help my kids get through college, and then they're on their own. I don't have that luxury. I mean, I have to be sure that I have enough to support them throughout their lifetime. And so it just means I have to plan better and maybe make some different decisions than I would have otherwise. But at the same time, it's taught me that money is not everything, and that, being sure that your family is taken care of emotionally is just as important as it is that they're taken care of financially. And if I'm so focused on money that I'm gone all the time working, 80 hours a week, and am not there to help my wife or my kids achieve, their true wealth, whatever that is, then I've failed as a father. And so to me, I think it puts it in perspective. And a lot of people have experiences. I mean, we all have stuff, right? I mean, life is going to be a challenge for all of us in different ways. And, when that happens to you, you just have to realize, that there's more to it than just how much money you make. And so it changes your perspective and changes some of the decisions that you make. But, hopefully if you've already gained some skills with your finances, it'll be easier to make those choices.
Yeah, and I commend you for your resilience and for your perspective on the situation.
Thank you. And for me also, it actually has given me opportunities to achieve true wealth in the fact that part of true wealth is about giving back to others, right? And so for me, it's given me opportunity. I mean, I've done some stuff within medicine for people with autism, and now as a financial planner, I've added a special needs planning certificate. So I'm trying to help the special needs community with their particular nuances, which are many. On special needs planning, so it's that experience of mine has driven some of what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best thing you can do when life hands you a particular situation is turn it into something positive and productive.
Yep,
That's really the best way to approach all forms of unexpected circumstance.
absolutely.
So, on that topic, you have built private practices, you've built nonprofits. What are some of the key leadership lessons that you've learned from those experiences?
Yeah, so I mean, I've done, I've in emergency medicine. You don't really build a practice individually typically. I mean, you're typically part of a contracted group with the hospital. So my experience in that is outside of emergency medicine primarily. I did help to create some small clinics. One was small and one was fairly big, with that focused on special needs. And I did some integrative. I helped to create an integrated medicine practice, that I never worked at that one full time, but it helped to kind of create that. And I think the biggest lesson from that is your team all has to be on the same page. So building a practice is really about building a team, and being sure that you know where you're going and what your mission is, and then you bring in the right people to make it happen. Because if you're not all on the same page, it's probably not going to work out. And so building businesses is difficult. There's a lot of risk in it, and it takes a lot of effort. So you want to be sure you're doing it with the right group of people and for the right reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. It reminds me of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, making sure you're all operating on a shared understanding of purpose and
Yeah.
creating a team that operates on the same foundation of values, same mission mindset. And that, of course, could be extremely difficult, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it is, and a lot of doctors do it. Doctors are business people as well, especially if they're in private practice and they have clinics, and I think the corporatization of medicine is changing that a little bit, whether it's good or bad. I mean, I have opinions on that. I mean, I think that sometimes we're giving up too much control to large corporations. But at the other reason why doctors do it is it's easier.
Yeah.
You don't have to build it all on your own, because that takes a lot of effort and time.
So, for a physician who wants to do it on his own, somebody that wants to branch into business or some form of financial endeavor, what advice do you have for them? Where should they start? Practically, mentally, what should they be thinking?
I would find a mentor first of all. There are lots of physicians out there that are very successful in their practice, either within medicine or with outside of medicine, and even if you just kind of start building a network on LinkedIn, I think there's lots of doctors out there that would be willing to help you, and some that you could pay to be there to have them be your coach. And even though, again, that's upfront investment, it's a great return on investment because they can just show you the path and just say, do this and do this, and you just need to follow it, but also to help you create the mindset that you need. And so that, I think that's probably the most important thing. But the other thing is to just start building skills, early on. And even if you don't necessarily know what it's going to turn into. I mean, just adding skills to your repertoire, whether it's computer or, learning formatting or just reading about businesses or reading about ventures or, all that kind of stuff. I think that's the first step. And at some point, you have to kind of figure out why you're doing it too. You got to know what your interests are and know what the purpose is and why you're doing it. And then ultimately it comes down to just trying some stuff and not being afraid to fail. I think a lot of people don't do stuff because they're afraid that they won't be successful, and that's okay. If you're not successful, it's fine. You learn something from it, and it's still a valuable experience, and so that the next time you'll probably do better.
Excellent. Yeah. Start somewhere, build a network, and just have no fear. Be courageous.
Yeah,
I mean, I think ultimately, if somebody really wants to get involved in something like that, they'll know what to do in a sense of making the opportunities available for themselves. You can't teach that
yeah,
mentality. That's
right.
something innate.
No, yeah, you just have a lot of it. A lot of it just comes down to being willing to step out into the dark a little bit and then knowing why you're doing it too. I mean, you have to know enough about yourself to know why you're doing it. And but I think once you do that, and if you're not afraid to fail, you won't. I mean, you might, but not in the long run,
In the
you
long
know.
run, absolutely not. Yeah, you may
Yeah.
confront temporary
Yeah.
setbacks, but if you that's Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. If you are absolutely relentless, nothing will stop you. Like once you've become so obsessed with your vision, it turns into just an absolute nonstop drive. So you'll get to
Yeah.
that point no matter what.
Yeah, founders are interesting people. I don't, the more you talk with founders of companies, the more you realize they're a different breed,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily have to be that driven to be successful in something, but I mean, if you are that and you want to found something, you kind of need to be. But a lot of it too is, and it doesn't even have to be in business. I mean, anything in life, you have to be willing to sacrifice and willing to make mistakes, and just I think lifelong learning is so important.
Yes, most definitely. Now, Dr. Jepson, thank you so much for your time today, sir. As we wrap things up, I want to ask you one final question. In line with the mission of the physician's mind, do you have any piece of advice as we part ways?
I think a lot of it is to be curious, to stay willing to learn, stay humble, stay hungry. In terms of just a willingness to kind of keep just driving your intentions. I think a lot of doctors just don't take the ownership over their finances. But if you're intentional, you do the planning, you seek out mentors, pay for advisors if you need to. Just take ownership of that learning. And if you do, you'll be successful. I mean, doctors have an opportunity just based on our position to be financially successful. If you just are intentional about that, it's going to work out. But so many people just don't think about it enough. And I think those people that are not intentional and make mistakes along the way that they don't re- they don't recover from, those are the ones that are still working in the mines when they're older and wishing they could retire. But you don't have to be there. You just have to, I think if you just you plan ahead and you take ownership of your own learning, I think you will be successful. Okay.
Dr. Jepson, thank you so much for joining me today, sir. Your advice is much appreciated, and I'm sure it's going to be an inspiration to many.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. I think it's great that we mentioned this beforehand, but at an early age, I can see that you're already being intentional about your own learning and broadening your skills and helping others along the way. And I think that's great. It's going to carry you far.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.